President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced the creation of an SIU Tribunal. The tribunal will help fast-track the recovery of money and assets stolen from state institutions through corrupt activities. It will also ensure that those responsible are held accountable. The tribunal will be headed by Judge Mlindelwa Makanya and will run for 3 years. To discuss the tribunal and how it will operate, I'm joined by University of Cape Town's Associate Professor in Public Law, Dr. Cathleen Powell. Good evening, Dr. Powell. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. From what you understand, how do tribunals like the one that has been set up by the president work normally or in an ideal environment?
What this tribunal is just a specialized court. Much as you get a commercial crimes court and you get a sexual offences court, this is a court to handle claims brought by the SIU. So it's not the unit that does the investigation, that's the SIU itself. But when the SIU has brought up a case, and it will be a civil case, not a criminal case, it will bring this case for recovery of money or for damages in normal civil law against the person who has benefited unduly or unlawfully to the SIU tribunal, rather than having to go through the normal court system, which is backlogged and would take much longer.
What becomes the advantage of a tribunal like this?
I think there are probably two. One is speed. As I said, the high courts are generally clogged up, and the magistrates' courts as well, so you don't have to wait for other cases to get out the way. The other will probably be expertise. Much like the commercial crimes court, the judges are going to be dealing with the same sorts of cases all the time, so they're going to develop expertise in handling that sort of problem. And that might also improve the speed with which cases are processed. Now,
I spoke to a person who is going to be involved, who somewhat expressed a fear that they hope that they won't fall into some, agendas that they may not know of. In other words, while this at face value may look like a very good and noble idea, but is there a potential from where you see it that it could easily be used to pursue other political and nefarious agendas?
I think the only way the tribunal could be manipulated to pursue a nefarious agenda is by starving it of cash so that it can't actually function at all. I have a fair amount of faith in the court system and in judges that they will actually do the job before them, which will be to hear a civil claim by the SIU against somebody who's benefited unlawfully or who's alleged to have benefited unlawfully, about whether there is a claim for return of the money. I think the legal case has to be decided on the evidence. The evidence will be public. The hearings will be public. There's not much manipulation that can happen there. And I don't think generally judges want to manipulate that. I know you're going to go on to talk about the judges, but I'm sure judges in general want to decide the facts on law and evidence. The only way that the tribunal could be hamstrung is if it's not given enough money to function.
What are the chances of this tribunal, or perhaps you can tell me if that is in fact what it's about or it's set out to do, but what are the chances of it creaming off, so to speak, and taking only those cases that it believes will put it in good stead, certainly in the eyes of South Africans, and those that are perhaps where they may think that there are less chances of success, and then it throws those ones back at the normal courts?
I think that it's the SIU that decides which cases to bring. And like in any other court, once the court gets the case, it's got to decide it on the facts. So the SIU Tribunal doesn't have the cherry-picking option. It's actually got to respond. It might throw out cases, but it would have to throw them out because they are insufficiently motivated by the SIU on the facts. And then you're going to need reasoning from the judges explaining why they're throwing out a case. And that all goes into the record, and that's how the judiciary remains accountable, is that the judgments are public.
In terms of the law, Kathy, under what circumstances, or can a president just get up and decide as he has done, or are there special circumstances? There has to be special circumstances before a president decides on this type of intervention.
In setting up this tribunal, the president was acting under the legislation that set up the SIU initially. That legislation has been amended over the years, but it now allows for the SIU, which is an investigative organ set up to recover money lost through corruption, through civil litigation, not criminal litigation. And then that same piece of legislation allows the president to set up a tribunal, if necessary, for cases that the SIU has uncovered. So I suppose one could argue that the president has acted irrationally if he sets up a tribunal for which there's absolutely no need, but that's not going to be the case when you've got a unit now uncovering huge amounts of corruption, which we know is happening because we've got two public commissions actually dealing with all the corruption at the time. So we know there's a lot to be done, and setting up a tribunal was one of the president's powers under the Act.
Well, that's going to my question, was what are the chances of him picking and choosing what to do, or whether or not to appoint such a tribunal? And I'm asking this because, I mean, we're only a few months to an election, and already you've had people saying, he's trying to do the easy things that he believes he can get away with because all of us think or will think that this is the right thing for him to do.
It could well be motivated partly by the need to look decisive and active towards the population. That makes perfect sense. But what it is the bringing in of the legal process to handle corruption more swiftly. And no matter what the motivation might have been, it might partly have been to garner votes. The effect of it is going to be that corruption is dealt with more swiftly. So I'm not a political commentator. I can't comment on that. I can see why it would be an advantage to do it now, but I don't think you can play with the law beyond a certain point. Once you bring the process in, once you set up the courts, they run. And that means that these corruption cases will be held, and they'll be held faster than they would have been in the normal system. Maybe we can ask why the president didn't do this earlier. Maybe we can ask why SIU has not been able to work better in the past couple of years. But certainly now it's a good thing that it's all up and running.
Kathy, thank you very much for your time and insights this evening. She is the University of Cape Town's Associate Professor in Public Law. A little later on,